afternoon. The Gospel of Mark, sponsored by the uh, Christ. My name is Charlie Hara, and we are using the gracious gift of Seashore Community Church of the Nazarene. Their gift to us is a little side room while we continue to look for our own space. So they're loaning us theirs. Welcome to the seventh chapter of Mark's Gospel. We're going to look at verses 24 to 30 today. It's a fascinating passage, and I'll read, and then we will begin to study it. Listen to the Gospel of Mark in Mark chapter 7, verse 24. Jesus left that place and went to the vicinity of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, yet he could not keep his presence secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an evil spirit came and fell at his feet. Um, the woman was a Greek born in Syria, Phoenicia. She begged Jesus, welcome, folks. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. First, let the children eat all they want, he told her, for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to their dogs. Yes, Lord, she replied, but even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Then he told her, for such a reply you may go. The demon has left your daughter. She went home and found her child lying on the bed and the demon gone. We're getting folks by the windows and what have you. I want to read it again, this time from Matthew's Gospel, Matthew chapter 15. Just listen to it. Matthew adds a few more little details that Mark doesn't give you. Notice some of it. Leaving that place, Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. A Canaanite woman from that vicinity came to him, crying out, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is suffering terribly from demon possession. Jesus did not answer a word. So his disciples came to him and urged him, Send her away, for she keeps crying out after us. He answered, I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. The woman came and knelt before him. Lord, help. Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall under their master's table. Jesus answered, Woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted. And her daughter was healed from that very hour. That was Matthew chapter 15. We're studying Mark chapter 7, 24 to 30. Welcome, Margie and Jim. Good to see you. Thank you. Um, as I read, what did you see? Anything stand out for you? The story of the Syrophoenician woman? Anyone? Anything? Anywho? Anywhere? Yes. Yeah, here's a case of one very big component of faith, and that is persistence, stick-to-itiveness. The idea of knocking and keep on knocking, seeking and keeping on seeking, asking and keeping on asking. Yeah, so good catch, Pat. Thank you. What else do you see here? So we'll discuss that in a few minutes.
She actually, I won't say stood up to, but she told Jesus, you know, they even the dogs were promised.
Yeah.
I don't want to say talk back.
Yeah. She wasn't put off by what was, on the surface, an off-putting comment. I mean, whatever else, he's compared her to a dog and effectively called her a dog. So yeah, she's not put off by that, as Steve said. She actually responds back. She doesn't slurk away and turn red and either get shy or angry. She sticks with him toe to toe, nose to nose, which is a violation of all COVID-19 procedures, but you get the point. Yeah, so we got that. Where does this take place? Notice both of them said and drew it out. Matthew and Mark are the two that have the details about this. Tyre, yeah, Tyre. Where is Tyre? Or, as Matthew added, Sidon. Tyre and Sidon, they're north of Galilee. So Galilee, if you think of Israel in this time and day, and for the most part even today, as is the size of New Jersey. It's a country about 150 miles north to south and about 50 miles wide. Tyre and Sidon, is north of the northern boundary, 50, 100 miles, because they're separated a little bit. And both of them are right on the Mediterranean coast. They still exist. They are still there. Tyre is ruins for the most part. Sidon is still there, and it is occasionally in the news. They both are in the nation of Syria, north of Israel. Syria, you know all about the king there who insists on bombarding and killing his people in a mass genocide. And yeah, well, nothing different. In that day, it was considered Syria, but also in the Old Testament, it was a part of the land of Phoenicia. So this woman is called a Syrophoenician. She was Greek, verse 26. She was a Greek born in Syria, Phoenicia. So, with all of that in mind, Greek, in Matthew's gospel, she's a Canaanite. What seems to be the emphasis they're putting on this woman? She is a Canaanite, a Greek Canaanite, not just any old kind of Greek Canaanite, but a Syrian Phoenician Greek Canaanite. Do you get his drift? What? She's not a Jew at all. Yeah. How is this passage, do you think, going to fit in with what we've been seeing in Mark's gospel? What have we been dealing with for the past couple of stories?
It shows that Jesus doesn't care whether it's Jewish or not.
Hmm.
He wants to care for the lost and the dogs, or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Remember what the Pharisees have been busy about? How come you guys touch women with issues of blood and lepers, and your disciples are going through the streets of Galilee and they don't wash your hands? There's uncleanness here. You don't wash your hands according to rabbinic teachings. So this is still on that theme of what's unclean and what isn't unclean. Jesus has defined it in the last story we had. You want to know what's unclean? It's not a woman, it's your own heart that makes things unclean. You can stay away from every pork sandwich and every camel burger you can find. And at the same time, it's not what's on the outside, but what's on the inside. And then Mark, when we didn't study it, I at least want to mention it to you. Mark says very quick in a parenthesis, um, Let me get it. Verse 19. Read up about 5 verses. For it doesn't go into his heart, but into his stomach and then out of his body, or as I told you, what he literally says is into the latrine. Here's the parenthesis. In saying this, Jesus declared all foods clean. He made them clean. There's nothing unclean. In other words, all the stuff you read in Deuteronomies, Leviticus 11, that's all done. This story, that little cryptic statement there, is elaborated upon in the book of Acts several times. When Peter is up on Simon the tanner's house, and we studied that for a couple of minutes, um, and the dream comes to him 3 times. The sheet's let down, and it's got tortoise sandwiches and snake snacks, and you name it, all the unclean foods prohibited in Leviticus 11. Peter says, no, I'm not about to touch that. And God says, what I've called clean, you don't call unclean. And what it was about, and now we get the understanding in Acts chapter 10 and in Acts chapter 15 when it's the whole, how can you have fellowship with a Gentile since he eats gravy? And remember, gravy is made up mostly of blood byproducts. The broth and stuff is the blood of the animal, and Jews were prohibited from eating blood. So how can you hang around Gentiles when they eat reptiles and they have gravy on their reptile? How do we fellowship with them in our church? And that's where the Jerusalem Council hands down its dictates, and it continues on like that. Can you eat food offered to idols? You get in Romans and Corinthians. It's a big issue. And in here, he simply leans forward and says, Jesus declared all foods clean. Now, what's fascinating is there are Christian denominations, they shall remain nameless, but there are Christian denominations that maintain that if you don't keep kosher and maintain Jewish dietary laws, then you can't really be a Christian. They apparently don't have Mark chapter 7, verse 20 in their Bible, because ask Jim Busher sometime. He traveled to Egypt, excuse me, he traveled to Israel and was there for how long? 5 weeks. I was going to say 5. I didn't know how many weeks or years. And he searched high and low from north Israel to South Israel for a cheeseburger. Well, a bacon cheeseburger. Okay, well, I mean, that is so flagrantly non-Jewish. Yeah, a bacon cheeseburger. That's all he wanted. And the bacon part put him off. Plus, you don't see the kid in the mother's milk, so cheese and meat don't go together. Other than that, Jim was fine. What's my point? Why do you think we have Easter hams? One of the common things in our house is an Easter ham. How many of you celebrate Easter with a ham? Just one guy? Well, you and I, Steve, will hang out because that was a very early church concept. He's made all food clean. Have you tasted ham? Boy, oh boy, I'll take your portion of it and your lobster and your clams and anything else I can get my hands on that you consider unclean. Uh, you get the point. Now then, along comes the human element of this. If there was ever an unclean person, it's a Syro-Phoenician Greek Canaanite woman with a demon-possessed daughter. Can you get any worse than this person? So when you read Matthew, um, get the bigger picture of this. Jesus and this woman have 3 exchanges. There's 3. The reason I read the Matthew 15 portion was you don't get the first one in Mark's gospel. When she comes yelling and saying, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. And she keeps yelling it apparently because the disciples come to him and said, send her away. She keeps bugging us. In Matthew's gospel, it says he didn't answer her. He didn't say a thing to her. He ignored her. Second thing he says, and you get this a little bit more um, treatment, a little clearer in Matthew, and that's the other reason I read it. He says, I've come for the lost sheep of Israel. You don't see it as much in Mark's gospel, but he ignores her at first. Then he turns to her and says, Lady, I've come to the lost sheep of Israel, and whatever else. A Greek Canaanite Syrophoenician woman with a demon possessed daughter. You're not quite what I've come for. And she then gives, as Pat showed us, she gives this wonderful retort. It's not smart alecky like you were saying. She just sticks in it. It shows her desperation. And he then gives her what she was wanting. She gets gets everything she was asking for. He had denied it originally as a dog. You don't let dogs into the, and here's where an American audience loses interest. Generally, in the days of Israel, you don't let your dog come to the dinner table. I've seen the sailors with their mutt, and both of them are handing off the T-bone steaks and the rest. What's that?
I said, Samantha, our Doberman used to sit in a dining chair.
You're making my point. So this is mute for the Bushers. Yeah, Samantha the dog actually had her own place and her own 4 pieces of sterling silverware, right?
Your mother came in and said, do you let the dog sit at the table and you put her bowl up there? I said, yes. That's how they got Steve to sit at the table.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And now if he were only paper trained, it would be great for Sue. Well, he comes into that area. Why did he go to Tyre, north into Phoenicia? Why does he leave Israel and go into Tyre? Why do you suspect he travels north 100 or so miles? What's been going on? Go ahead. To meet with her. And it's been heating up in the south. The Pharisees of Jerusalem have chased him into Galilee. Everything he does in Galilee now is being monitored. And so it gets to the point at which he's going to give it a little bit of steam venting. He's going to remove himself just to let things calm down a little bit. It shows you that Israel really did misunderstand who he was and why he was there. He's actually safer in a Gentile territory than he is with his own people. Go ahead. What were you going to say, Margie? Or Jim? Jim. I get you two confused. Gray haired and glasses.
I don't care what color it is, as long as it stays on my head.
Yeah. Well, you had to direct that to me, didn't you? Yeah. Well, have you seen me in my mask? Yeah. I looked like a ping pong paddle advertisement. What were you going to say?
Well, is that why wherever he went and when he healed these people, he said, no, don't
Yep.
tell anybody. I thought, why would you do that if you're
Yeah.
and did he stay in Israel because of the prophecies all the way along? He wanted to show that Israel was the message people.
Yeah. You got several things there, and the answer is yes and yes. So let's move on. No. Um, Understand that when he first does some healings, he is healing quite a few in the Gospel of Mark. He is healing quite a few demon possession cases. And when they obey him, the demons, and when they talk to him and things, that is like pouring gas on the fire that the Pharisees have set. So, do you see? He is in league with the demons. So that's why he tells the demoniacs or the former demoniacs, don't go and broadcast this. It's not because he's being, shy and innocent. It's because he's not wanting the Pharisees to jump and kill him right out. He knows who's going to kill him. You got it. He's in complete control. But yes, then this one, notice, he shows up in Tyre, which is a Gentile territory. And when he shows up, he enters a house, didn't want anyone to know it, yet he couldn't keep his presence a secret. Even the Gentiles are finding out about, about Jesus, the Son of David, so that it's getting quicker and quicker. Things are moving along, and he's getting more attention. In just 2 chapters from now, you're going to see the first of his prophecies that he's going to go into Jerusalem and be handed over to the chief priests and Pharisees, the scribes, and that he's going to be killed there. They're going to kill him. So, he knows, and time is hastening on, as it were, but he's in complete control. And it's going to be on Passover. He's going to do that for all of the fulfillment of Scripture. It's all completely in his control. So yeah, these are safety valves when he takes these trips out, or when he goes into the wilderness. He's letting it calm down. He's in perfect control and monitoring his own, the reactions to his ministry. So yeah, but I think it's interesting that when he was born, it was safer for him to be in Egypt than in Israel. Now that he's ministering, it's safer to be, yeah, it is. You got it. Yep. But at the same time, let's go into it here a little bit. This is Gentile territory. Um, what was God's plan for the Gentile nations all along? Was he always only going to be the God of Israel? Do you have any hints at what he's going to do? Yeah. When he makes the Abrahamic covenant in Genesis 12, he says, I will make of you a great nation, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed by you. So that his intent was all along to win the world and restore what Adam had undone in the garden. He was going to get his people. And so don't miss the sheer amount of times that God's plan for the world is mentioned in a very short sentence. The knowledge of the Lord will cover the earth like the waters cover the sea. In other words, extensively, intensively, will know him. That's not the way it was for the Gentile lands. God's plan was, I'll make a channel of redemption. Israel is going to be this nation, and Israel is sent to the Gentiles. And that's why you find so many Gentiles coming into the Old Testament stories, from Melchizedek and Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, and Nahum the leper, Naaman, not Nahum, Naaman the leper, the Syrian leper, and Samson's wives, and you get many Gentiles coming in. Rahab the prostitute in Jericho comes over into it. Notice that when you turn to the first page of the New Testament, you get Jesus' genealogy. And what's fascinating is there are 4 women mentioned at genealogy, and they're all Gentile women. Ruth, a Moabitess. You get the concept. They were to be coming in all along. Israel found itself in the catbird seat by having the scriptures and having the covenant, and they owned the temple, and everything was in that New Jersey side country. And they decided to sit on the lead, as it were, if you use Pastor Rudy's illustration. Go ahead.
I always found it fascinating from a historical standpoint, for someone who don't know, a little history professor, that it ultimately will be the Gentiles who are responsible for the spread and the success of the religion, not the Jews. The very people that the Jews view as unclean and barbaric and semi-civilized. We
Yeah.
speak about how common that is to view
Yeah.
any different culture that way
Yep.
in that area of the country.
Mm.
ultimately ones who
Yeah.
propagate
Excellent. And it just shows that what we see setting up in the Old Testament and it goes into the New Testament was still the squabbles. What are we going to do with Gentiles coming into a Jewish religion? And then within the New Testament itself, it just becomes a very definite, predominantly Gentile group. Go ahead, Jim. You were going to say something.
talk about that, the Jews, and it comes to mind about the heart.
Yeah.
It says, and I was always wondering about that, but I think it's like Pharaoh.
Yes.
Pharaoh hardened his own heart, and then he hardened it to the point, okay, that's what you want. And the same with the Jews, and that hardening grafted in the Gentiles.
Yeah.
But I always thought, before I thought of it that way, that's not fair.
Mm.
You hardened it, said you hardened your heart.
Spoken like a true American. You know, if there's anything spiritual, it's got to come through an American filter. Yeah. Where's the one man, one vote? Where's my, freedoms and rights? And yeah, you got it exactly. God had planned it all along, and He would have used Israel. Salvation comes to the Jew first, then the Greek, as Paul says, and others repeat it in the New Testament. And it did come to the Jews first. And the Jews answered by saying, yeah, we think you're demon possessed, or worse, you're crazy and a lunatic. That was the reaction. And when they stood in front of Pontius Pilate and said, we have no king but Caesar, crucify him, crucify him, it spoke volumes of the rejection of the terms of the new covenant. Um, we love the notion of Jehovah and us having the market cornered on all spiritual things. And Jesus over and over said, but you don't get to keep the corner on the market. It's going to break out. This temple's going to come down. These things that you're holding on to as your traditions, and that's the 7th chapter. Your traditions, they're about as my mom would say, useless as something on a boar hog. I won't go into the details of it, but you can get it. Your traditions nullify the Word of God. I'm here to fulfill the Word of God. So, yeah, you're thinking right on this. Absolutely. Let's turn to a couple of passages, if you would. And I'll ask one or two of you to read some. Somebody turn to. Uh, It went right out of my head. What was I going to have you read? Oh, Ephesians 2, 14 to 16. That was it. Ephesians 2, 14 to 16. What do we do with this Jew-Gentile split? And never, ever in the Old Testament think that Gentiles were to be treated as unclean. God has brought them, Jehovah brought them into the covenant with Israel to show that there should be this give and take, this back and forth, that if they come and accept the terms and conditions of the covenant, then you bring them right in. But here's what happens, and this is what we see in this formative stage in Mark chapter 7. Ephesians 2, 14 to 16, please. Anybody? Jim, you got it? Go for it.
For he himself is our peace, who has made both one and has broken down the middle wall of division between us, having abolished in his flesh the enemy, that is, the law of commandments contained in ordinances, so as to create in himself one new man from the two, thus making peace, and that he might reconcile them both to God in one body through the cross, thereby putting to death the enemy.
Good. That two becoming one, it's on the Jew-Gentile split, and what Christ has done is become not just God of Israel. And here you get a little preview of coming attractions, but he's come also not only to the lost sheep of Israel, as he says, but also those of the Gentiles. So here is a woman who comes to him. Again, let me give you the handful of things. Not just, not just a Greek, but a Canaanite Greek. Not just any Canaanite Greek, but a Syrophoenician Canaanite Greek, with a demon-possessed kid. It's stacked against this woman. I think of it this way. If this is sort of his first incursion into Gentile territory, and we haven't seen a lot of it before this, he has, as Marge said, why did he go to Tyre? To meet with this woman, yeah, and to get away from the Pharisees' pressure, but to meet with this woman, why? Because there's a sense in which this may be the worst case scenario ever. And if he can work in this one, then there is some hope for the Irish. And as he was saying, groups and civilizations square off and hate one another and things. We just went through St. Patrick's Day, and I live to tell about it, which is never an easy thing. Am I right, Chris McCune? Yep. Yeah. So I told the group this last night. Saw my Coast Guard neighbors, young guys, and I said, "How are you guys going to celebrate?" Asking Coast Guard how they're going to celebrate St. Patrick's Day is just the dumbest question. I recognize that. I was starting up a conversation, and they said, "Well, we've done the corned beef and cabbage. My girlfriend made that. We're not gonna. Uh, we've decided we're going to get a few beers." And I said, "Okay, yeah, that's a good way to celebrate St. Patrick's Day." And I said, "And if you really want us to celebrate it as neighbors, we'll meet out on the lawn after your beers and we'll pick out a fist fight." And the one, Jordan, says, "But I understood you to be a pacifist." And I said, "Where'd you get that at?" He goes, "Yeah, pacifist between his teeth." So yeah, that's the hatred of nations for the Irish. Um, look at her request. What is she wanting from him? Save her daughter. Remember, this woman is probably a part of that group who have heard about Jesus. And she's heard things like demon possessed people in Capernaum, which is, 100 miles or so, being healed, and epileptic boys in the temple that were possessed with demons being healed, and Jesus raising people from death. I mean, whatever else Peter's mother in law in Capernaum was, she was as good as dead, and she gets up, and it's a resurrection like event. The point is, she's heard that somewhere, somehow. This woman is steeped in Greek gods, probably, and if it's not Greek, then it's Canaanite gods, and if it's not that, Syro had their own. The Syrian gods had plenty of, fertility and war gods and things. So this woman had a few gods under her belt or in her repertoire, and she passes by all of that, as Matthew puts it, to come and scream out for help, pleading with Jesus. How does Jesus respond to her? Again, first ignores her. Then he gives her a story, compares her to what? Why would he call her a dog, or even indirectly call her a dog? Isn't that demeaning? Isn't that uncharacteristic of Jesus? I mean, if I went to your house today and Sue is sitting on, and I referred to her as a dog, you'd be a pacifist. You'd pacifist right through my teeth. I know that, as you should.
Speaking like a Jew, she would be a dog.
Yeah.
It's also important to this and all these interactions with particularly Greek culture is that often these multi-gods took human form. So she would not be totally astonished
That God came in flesh. Yeah.
but also this Jesus, I don't want to say, kind of testing her to see whether or not she believes in all those gods, rocks, and everything else.
Yeah.
Isn't he trying to pressure her into reverting into her old way or whatever way?
Yeah.
And she stands up and says, "No,
Yeah.
you're the way, the truth, and the life."
Some commentators want this to be a tone of voice. So if I came in here and saw John and said, "John, you old rascal, and had a little bit of a lilt to my voice. But if I came in here and said, John, you rascal, it'd mean a world of difference. I don't think it's that. I think it's closer to what he said. I think, and this, take it for what it's worth, this is one of those that you can't get definite on since I don't have a clear explanation. This is Mark's way of saying, hey, enter into the story and think it through. Why would Jesus call a woman, a Gentile woman in such desperate straits, dire straits, a dog? And I think he's doing exactly as he said. The Pharisees that I just left think of you less than a human. You're nothing more than a mongrel to them. Mongrel, yeah, pit bull and poodle and bulldog and all the rest. That's a mongrel. Syro-Phoenician, Canaanite, Greek. You're one giant mongrel. Man, you're a Heinz 57 if there ever was one. That's what they think about you. But he already knows what he's going to do. And that goes to what Margie said. He came or deliberately beat feet to Tyre in order to connect with this woman. That explains John 4. He went to the well at Sychar, Jacob's well, in order to meet with that Samaritan woman by the well. That's clear in John 4. I think it's a fairly easy case to make that Jesus came to Tyre. I always say Sire when I do Tyre and Sidon. Sire, it's all one town now, like Minneapolis and St. Paul, Sidon and Tyre. Um, he went there for this one woman. What's he doing? As Steve described it, he's bringing her along. Ignore her. If she's put off and leaves because he's ignored her, then he's sifted her out. If I insult her and call her a colloquial term for what Jews think of Gentiles, and there's still some truth to that, and I'm not anti-Semitic here. I used to work for a hospice, and I've told this story before, but Chris hasn't heard it, so it's worth it just for Chris. Um, I was a chaplain for the hospice, and you remember what they referred to me as, Charlie Chaplin, and it was a hospice service for Holy Redeemer. There were three of us on his hospice. I was the token Protestant. There was a Catholic chaplain and a Jewish chaplain, rabbi. He was a rabbi. I won't use his name because he's still there and still practicing. It's not hard to figure him out from me saying Holy Redeemer, but you get the point. On one occasion, we were having our in clinicals, the teams all got together. Every hospice patient got a chaplain assigned to them, a social worker, and a nurse. And we would get together, kind of confer in the large group and go through our patient list and say how everybody's doing. And the nurses would say, I think so and so is in pre-active, active dying. And that triggered the chaplains to go over and visit more often. On one occasion, we had a lag of about an hour, and Donna was off that day, and I had wanted her to come over and meet folks, and I didn't realize how unfitting that was, but that's never stopped me. I've never fit in, so I invited her over, and I especially wanted her to meet the rabbi. So she came in, and I didn't get to her in time to say, whatever else you do, don't go to shake his hand. Don't try and shake his hand. So my charming, beautiful wife comes in, and I say, this is my wife, Donna. Donna, this is Rabbi, da, da, da. And she does the very thing. And he brings his hand behind him, and she turns bright red, which is embarrassment, but I also know this is her cue that when you come home, you're dead. Yeah, I'm a pacifist. I will pass my fist. Yeah. So he had told that story when he would introduce, Jewish things with Jewish patients. We, as the Protestants and the Christians, had to have some protocol and some decorum with them. He said, and when I do the Christian thing, because he was often called in to do Christian deals, we had this exchange program going on. He said, it's been often my case that I will meet people, and when they go to shake my hand, he'll say to them, I'm sorry, I don't shake hands. And they'll grab him and hug him. He just sort of, he cringes when he says it, but he's also laughing as if to say, you Christians are just, too, whatever. You get on my nerves.
Another part of my life, intel part, geopolitical part, we cultures, in my particular case, it was Islamic and then Chinese. And this experience is entirely what we have to bring to them. We as Western Christians don't realize how unique our view and how tolerant we are of differences than almost every other culture and religion in the world.
Yeah.
And I know we used to, so many of our people, when we were dealing with Orientals or Muslims, with good intention to do these offensive things. And we had to teach them very early on, don't do this. And probably the biggest no, don't invade their space.
Yeah. Yeah.
Western Christians like to get right up to you and into your face. And hug and touch and like that's the if you want to offend a Muslim or a Chinese or a Japanese, that's the way you do that initially, and you lost all credibility and all chance.
Yeah. We are back patters and shoulder tappers and all of that. And you can see even gracious Orientals just kind of cringe.
You've heard me say that one of the biggest parts of Western Christian hubris is we tend to think the rest of the world is just like us.
Yeah.
We just have a different language and dress different.
Yeah.
Up here, they are entirely, not entirely, in major critical ways, very, very different in their worldview than we are.
Mm.
And until we realize that, we can't really interact with them effectively.
And here is one of those. He stepped out of the Jewish circles and into the Gentile circles, and we've got this dialogue entered into. Doesn't answer her the first time. He insults her the second. So have I put you off by ignoring you? No. I'll call you a dog. Well, she's still there and hanging toe to toe with him. Then he says this, and I'm going to read it in Matthew because in Matthew he underscores it and it actually becomes its own little phrase. It's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to their dogs. She has asked for something that he calls what? Children's bread. Children's bread. What do you think that means? She's asking for a healing, an exorcism, a healing. He calls it children's bread. What's in his thinking there?
Well, most of the families like that would have fed their children first before they eat themselves.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's their children, meaning the bread you're asking for, this privilege you're asking for, it belongs inside the family. And whatever else you're asking the son of David, the Jewish king, for a privilege that belongs to Jewish kids, and you're a Syro, do I need to do it anymore? Syro-Phoenician, Canaanite, Greek woman with a demon-possessed daughter. You're asking me to give what belongs to the people of God's family to those that are, in the eyes of the Pharisees, dogs.
Don't share the spiritual manna.
That's exactly it.
And yet Christians are all about.
Sharing everything we can get our hands on. Yeah. And we've learned it from Jesus, who takes that which belonged to Israel. I've come to the lost sheep of Israel. That's where this is headed. This is a privilege. And notice, up to this point, that healing ministry he's been very involved and engaged in has gone to the Jewish people. It's in Galilee. He does a couple down in Jerusalem when he heads down south. The concept is it has been predominantly a Jewish thing. And now this Gentile lady shows up and says, I'd like to have some of that, please. So there is something called the children's bread, hey? And the answer is yes. Healing is one of those great covenant blessings. So, one of the things I look forward to when I talk to Steve, and I'm pointing to Steve because his wife has been so sick so long, and we have anointed her with oil. In fact, I use now a paint roller and a pan to anoint Sue Sailor because it's just the frequent flyer miles. And today I was braced, well, she's about the same. And no, she's improving. Still doesn't have an appetite, but she's improving. That's the children's bread. That's the covenant privileges. That's the good news of being in the family of God. He's a good, gracious father. He's the king, and we're princes and princesses. Some of us that behave more like princesses. I'm not pointing anybody out, John, but you get the idea. Um, yeah. So there's a blessing to be had here. Don't forget the basis for this is his work on the cross. Um, the other passage that I'll often mention at this point ties Mark and John together. John chapter 3, when Jesus is talking to Nicodemus, and he says to Nicodemus, for as the serpent was lifted up in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up. He's making a deliberate and intentional connection between his work on the cross and that serpent in the wilderness in the book of Numbers. Whatever that serpent in the wilderness was for, it was for healing, physical healing. So if he's going to do that, should I not, by inference, begin to think maybe there's physical provision in the work of Christ? And the answer is yes. He came to touch bodies and heal them. He came to give new birth to souls that are broken down and decrepit. Just speaking personally there. So he's told her, it's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to their dogs. She then, as Steve pointed out, still not put off. Doesn't say a thing, calls her a dog, and then says, you're asking for that which you have absolutely no right to ask for. You're outside, lady. And she said, yeah, but. And I think the Lord looks for this, as Margie said, this persistence. He looks for those that'll keep coming. Think of it this way. Um, 3 times here for this lady. Uh, when Paul asked for a healing of the thorn in his flesh in 2 Corinthians, it was 3 times that he asked. Yes, but. Don't have what you're asking for? We watched Sue Sailor in Cooper Hospital and Jefferson and everywhere else that she went for a while, but we did not give up. And by we, I'm saying the sailors didn't. I was traveling 300 and 400 miles a day trying to get her anointed. And the point is, the Lord has answered graciously. Doesn't mean she doesn't need more oil, and we'll continue that. But He loves the ones that come knocking at the door. If you don't have what you're asking for, keep knocking because you know you're knocking at the right door. And here's a woman who's insistent and persistent and keeps saying, yes, but, yes, but. I know you can do it. Will you do it? Well, what you're asking for doesn't belong to you. Yeah, but don't you even have dogs lick crumbs? Not apparently Samantha. Was that her name, Samantha? Samantha again had the first portion. Yes, Jewish people would serve the children first, but not in the Busher home. Whatever Samantha wanted was first and foremost. You get the concept. Um, so, so, what does he do then to end this story? What does Jesus do? Heals her. And where was he when he healed her? Right beside her and had to touch her? No, we don't even know where she's at. This is a new one. He's been laying his hands on them. Now, this is a healing from the distance. And when the Syrophoenician Greek Canaanite woman gets home, her daughter is no longer demon possessed. It's really an amazing story, and one that I think we ought to take hope in, because whatever else, we're not Canaanites. We're not Syrophoenician. I'm not Greek. Although I always thought it'd be fun to be part French and part Greek. And you could refer to me as freak and mean it. It just would make so much more sense. Anything else in this one? Well, then let's end with prayer. And Steve Thompson, we say hello to you. And it's not raining here, so get over here quick. Father in heaven, we bow in your presence again. And we thank you for your word, which is true, and it is a lamp to our feet, a light to our path. We believe its truth communicated to us. Thank you for the insight of my brothers and sisters, for history lessons and for cultural application. Make this book live in us. Let us follow the Master's example and realize it's not what's on the outside of us that makes us defiled, it's what's on the inside. So, touching lepers and touching women with issues of blood for 12 years, and even dealing with demon possessed Gentiles is not going to defile us. In fact, it's going to define us. We really do want to be those that do give the bread out and do relieve suffering and do help and serve and love and communicate. Help us to be sensitive to the cultures we come into contact with, because whatever else, this nation has become missions in reverse. We no longer have to travel to China to win Chinese. They're here. We don't have to go to Pakistan or the Middle East. They're my neighbors. Help us to make an impact for your kingdom, Lord, and do it with a cultural sensitivity. Help us to believe with everything in us. What Jim read in Ephesians chapter 2 is true to this day, and that is you've made the two one. You have one people and one church because there's one Lord and one faith and one baptism. There's one Lord over all who is in all and through all. There is one Spirit. And so, Father, with our nation heightened in its cultural sensitivities and its racial boundaries, please give us a sensitivity to somehow preach unity, but in the terms of Jesus Christ, who makes us all one. We pray this for your glory, O Lord. Thank you for this. Thank you for Chris and his abilities to put this out on streaming video. We pray that it's useful to your kingdom, and for your glory we pray this, Lord. Amen. Good. Sermon on the Mount tonight, 7 o'clock. You on Zoom, yes. You're right. And by the way, and that's for the group here, and are we still on? I get my second COVID shot next Wednesday. I am told that the second one can be a little difficult with some side effects. And if that's the case, I know what that means. It means Wednesday I get the shot, and by a week from today, I'll be in intensive care and hovering between life and death. You don't know me. I don't do. Totally bald. What? Totally bald. Totally bunk? Bald. No. Okay, yeah. Okay, so that's the side effect. I'll come in looking like Yul Brynner, right? Or you know what? you guys can take your hair and just leave with it. So next week, we hope to have it. If not, it'll be from my deathbed, and you'll hear the death rattle, and I'll need probably Rabbi in to see me at my deathbed. We'll live stream it from the hospital bed. Okay. You don't know my propensity to take